on Skype and calling from Virginia. Hello, Tom.
What's going on, guys?
You're on the air. Go ahead.
Hey, so I just want to say thanks, man, because I'm recently just kind of found all this liberty stuff. But you guys were talking the other day about the Pledge of Allegiance and things, and so I've been trying to find like something for my kid to do other than like he does like jujitsu and Muay Thai. But I was like, oh, Cub Scouts, I did that when I was a kid, and I went to that first meeting tonight, and just like out of nowhere, like they were throwing around all this religious propaganda, and then like the Pledge of Allegiance, and just like automatically everyone in the room like stood up and did the Pledge of Allegiance and was like robots. And I'm just sitting there looking at everybody, and they're looking at me like I'm crazy for not standing up.
Oh yeah,
it's just really odd. But
you're not only are you not you're disrespecting the fallen veterans now, you're also corrupting the children.
Well, now wait, you said you brought your son to one of these Cub Scout things?
Yeah.
What was he doing when you were staying seated?
He stood up, and then I talked to him and that's kind of what I wanted for advice. Like, he's only 6. It's like, how do I really explain this to him? Like, it's not what they tell you in school. I asked him, I said, well, do you know what it is to say the Pledge of Allegiance? He's like, no. I'm like, he's like, well, it's for the state, to respect our flag. And I'm trying to explain to him at 6 years old, like, without getting too much into detail about really what it is in a way he can understand.
Now, Mark has a 6-year-old. However, Mark, your son does not go to a government school, so I don't imagine he's coming across the Pledge of Allegiance, if at all.
No, he has no contact with the Pledge of Allegiance.
How would you explain it? I mean, it's, if you were at a city council meeting or something like that, and then that happened.
I think it's probably easiest to just say that's these people's religion. Well, I don't see what else
It's true. It's a true statement.
It looks a lot like a religious act. I don't really know how to describe it otherwise.
It's chanting towards an idol.
There's a lot of ancestor worship involved. You'll hear people talk about the soldiers and the founding fathers and things like that. That's, ghosts. I mean, it to me, it's just a lot like, worshiping, saying a prayer to a graven image.
Yeah. I mean, I try to tell him like what you guys said. I'm like, well, like when you said the other day that flags are really just war banners and identification purposes for either on the sea or or when you're in a conflict to see who's on what side and who's friend or foe. And he kind of got that, but he still kind of looked at me like, what are you talking about? You're crazy. But I told him, I said, look, you don't have to say it. But we got up and left out of there just because I don't know. I just wasn't digging all the propaganda, and it was really unorganized.
Yeah. There's also the campfire kids, I think is what it's called. So it's another sort of.
Is this as a competitor to Boy Scouts or something? Yeah. Is it better in some way? Do they not have the religious overtones, the state worshiping?
So I've heard. I don't know a lot about it.
Isn't it true there's also, at least in New Hampshire, some sort of a group that is being created?
Yes.
What's that called?
I think it's called Liberty Scouts or Freedom Scouts or something like that being created.
Okay. So taking away all of the statist doctrine that you would find in a group like the Boy Scouts, and actually, just teaching survival skills and camping stuff and doing all the boy stuff, that you'd expect to see out of a group like that, but without the overtones of worshiping the state.
Do you think
sounds like a good idea?
Do you think there's some benefit to teaching youngsters, how to get along with other statists? Because they're going to encounter them for most of their lives.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just like you would teach someone how to get along with the Jehovah's Witnesses who are going to come knock at the door. I mean, it's always nice to be pleasant to people. And
Free Rangers is what it's called on Facebook.
Not be mean to them. I mean, I had some Jehovah's Witnesses come by here the other day, and I was very nice to them.
Yeah, but I mean more so like going along to get along type of stuff. Like, isn't that sometimes a valuable lesson? Like, hey, kid, you don't want to be the weird kid, so go ahead and say the pledge.
No,
if you
I
don't
think
want
that's
to be
a dangerous lesson.
Yeah.
I mean, why would someone who is...
I don't think that there's anything wrong with
just
saying...
because they don't want to get beat up or they don't want to be the odd kid or something.
I think you got to choose it for yourself.
Sometimes camouflage is like a valuable skill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you have to choose the radical step for yourself. And I would say that the best choice for a kid is just stand and... just stand there, show some level of, people consider that the minimum level of respect. So, that's a thing to do. But Cub Scouts is you're full on, both feet in, statist indoctrination at that point. I still remember this is what they do is they indoctrinate you. I promise to do my best, to do my duty, to God and my country, and obey the laws of the pack. I mean, it's full on.
I remember when I was in Boy Scouts, my parents made me do something after I quit. Was it gymnastics or something like that? I quit doing something else that I was doing, and so they've made me do.
You're going to be well-rounded.
Something to take its place, and I never actually said the oath. They wanted me to swear this oath thing, and I wouldn't do it. Well, that was because at that time I wasn't so much anti-state as I was anti-religion. I mean, I've never liked authority at the same time. So in order to get to the rank of actual Boy Scout, to where then you can start getting the patches, I guess. So you have to get the scout patch first, which means you have to be willing to swear their little oath thing and say the Pledge of Allegiance, and I wouldn't do any of that stuff. So I never even got to the rank. I was skipping the meetings and things like that and hanging out outside rather than go in. I couldn't stand that organization. But I liked the camping. I did go camping with them once and had fun, but that was it. Hey, Tom, anything else you want to share?
No, I just think Mark had a good point there. Like, I wouldn't want to tell my kid not to stand because next thing you know, CPS is going to be standing at my door saying, "What are you teaching your kid?" Or getting in the mix of things. You know what I mean? You know how that stuff goes. But unfortunately, my wife and I both have to work, so we can't.
Yeah. If anybody gives you anybody in the family or whatever gives you flack, go to YouTube, search "Whitest Kids You Know" pledge, and I think it really sums it up. It is it's just a brilliant piece of social commentary on the Pledge of Allegiance and how they have these little kids pledging allegiance when they don't know what it means, and what allegiance means, and promising to go and kill the other little kids of other countries if the case ever comes to that. And I mean, it's just it's just
pretty funny.
Yeah, because I mean, they're from. I don't know that there's a Canadian pledge. As I understand it, there is no pledge to the flag in most countries. Certainly not one that they have to say on a regular basis, every single day, like we did in government school when I was there.
Tom, thanks for the call tonight. I appreciate it. Toll-free number is 855-450-FREE. I mean, I understand that that's got to be a real struggle for parents, especially parents sending their kids to the government schools. Is like, okay, you don't like, as parents, you understand the state's a terrible idea. You are pro-freedom, but yet there you are. You're sending your kids to these state schools, and then you're afraid because if your kid says something about you smoking pot at your house or some other belief system that you might have that the state may find dangerous, that all of a sudden an investigation can be launched, your children can be taken away from you on a moment's notice, on a whim, on the say-so of some anonymous tipster or some bureaucrat with an agenda, and I can understand that would be very scary. At the same time, and I don't have a child, so, obviously take this with a grain of salt, but I would like to think that I would encourage my child to stand up for themselves and to, in this case, sit down for themselves during the pledge, and that I'd let them know I'd be there to back them, in whatever trouble they got into.
I think that is something that one should do, but I think you said stand up for themselves, and that's what they have to do. They need to not stand up because Uncle Ian says it's the right thing to do, and they need instead to stand up because they have a strong feeling one way or the other about it. And the fact that you had a strong feeling about it, I think, is unusual. I think that most kids just want to go along to get along in order to get through the really uncomfortable period of time we call young adulthood, childhood and young adulthood.
I was anti-authority as long as I can remember. I don't know why. Maybe you are born that way. Maybe some people are born that way.
I think that's absolutely true. That some people, there's nature and nurture. I don't know what the argument is, but somewhere along the line you got messed up.
I think my parents did a fine job, actually. Thanks very much.
Let's get him on the phone and talk to him about it.
So we've got Don. He's in St. George, Utah, listening to KZNU. Hello, Don.
Hello.
Hey, you're on the air.
Thanks for having me on.
Welcome.
I just had maybe a different perspective about the Pledge of Allegiance.
Okay, sure.
You guys sound pretty entrenched or at least determined about your point of view, but I wanted to offer a different one just for consideration. But
yeah.
Just out of curiosity, are any of you married?
I'm married.
Yeah, and did you have kind of a rite that you went through with that?
Yeah,
Like
we went through an Anglican service because it was pretty much the only thing that we could get done on short notice. And also, I had worked at the church at the radio station, so I got a relatively good deal as far as the cost of it. But I made sure he didn't say Jesus, but he slipped in Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost on me.
Okay. Well, anyway, this isn't a religious conversation, but more just that there are rights and cultures. If you've signed a contract, you make agreements, and we have traditions too that are fun traditions. And some religions or some people may not, agree with those traditions for whatever reason. But within a family, there's traditions that everyone looks forward to. And my perspective specifically on the Pledge of Allegiance is that while I actually appreciate your argument about it, and I think there is an element to consider with what you're saying, but for me personally, and I think for a lot of people who have sacrificed for what to them is liberty and justice for all. I mean, this is the nation for which it stands, that we love. And so I think we're not, in our hearts, we're not feeling like we're pledging allegiance to a state, although, again, I'm not going to take argument with what you've said, but rather to the ideal for which it stands, liberty and justice for all. And I think this is what a lot of people who stand and have made sacrifices, and certainly it'd be a hard argument to make, that we as American people have not benefited from people who have gone on before us and made selfless sacrifices to better the world and to better our place of living. So just a different perspective there.
So what you're saying is, let me make sure I've understood what you said here, is that when you're engaging in the Pledge of Allegiance, you feel as though not so much you're not really concerned with what the pledge actually says, but how you feel about the pledge, and you feel like it's...
I'm not saying that. I think that you guys have interpreted the pledge a certain way, and I'm very clear on exactly what it says. It says, to this nation for which it stands, and then goes on to identify the ideals. And to me, you guys are sort of cutting that part out. So I'm not.
I like
saying
the
I'm
ideals.
What it says.
I like all the ideals.
Well, so do I.
What my concern is, and the reason, so here is my movement. I was definitely a pledge sayer at one point, and the way I sort of transitioned was, I found out that the pledge was written by a National Socialist, a Nazi, and that the original salute to it looked much more like the salute that the Nazis do than it does the hand over the heart thing. They had to modify that after World War II because, Americans just weren't really into that, or actually it was a little before World War II. Americans weren't into that Nazi salute thing once Hitler started doing it, and that really bothered me, and it got to me thinking about it. And then what I realized let me finish, and I'm just telling you my journey. Yeah. And what I realized for me is that the pledge is an empowering statement. It gives power to the government, because there is no country, there is no republic, there is no American people. There's a group of people in Washington, D.C. that say that they rule over you. You can either choose to accept that, or you cannot choose to accept that. I like Eagles. I like the colors red, white, and blue. I like it when F-18s fly over football games. I like that stuff. But when it comes to giving those people in Washington, D.C. power, I realize by standing there, putting my hand over my heart, and looking at their battle flag, that I'm empowering them by giving them consent to everybody who's in the room, and that if I refuse the consent, that I can do one small, tiny little drop of disempowering those people in Washington, D.C.
Well, just to say, I actually quite admire your point of view, and I share it quite a bit. I do not like the way the government is grabbing power, and the ideals of liberty and justice for all are really slipping away. I think it's evident to most of us. So I actually appreciate your point of view.
Well, isn't there some danger then, Don? I mean, if you can recognize, as we do on this show, that liberty and justice for all is a joke of an idea in this country, and it probably never was accurate. I mean, there have always been people in search of power lording it over others. We just know more about it now than we might have done 200 years ago because information travels more effectively today. But isn't it sort of, if there's no real liberty to be found and there's no real justice to be found in the United States, by participating in the pledge and or by encouraging our sons and daughters to participate in the pledge, to just go along to get along, doesn't that help the government continue its legitimacy and in people's minds to make people think this idea that, oh, well, it's the best country on the planet, it's the freest country on the planet, we're so free here, because, well, they've repeated it over and over again as they're very, very young, and of course, when you're young and you're repeating things over and over again, it's indoctrination, and so they grow up to believe these things, which of course aren't actually true. And doesn't that kind of create something that's not real in people's minds, and isn't that dangerous?
Well, I don't think so completely. I think this is an argument that can be made with taxes too. Paying taxes is a dilemma, right? I mean, we're empowering this big machine that is consistently taking away our life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. So it's the same dilemma. Now, is saying the Pledge of Allegiance dangerous? I'll just make the argument that it absolutely not, unless you feel it is, then okay. But I think you guys ought to just consider that many people who say it are preserving in their minds and in their hearts the ideal for which we stand. And when it no longer, and look, when you say there's no liberty to found, I think that's just simply not true. There is liberty to be found here. I've lived in other countries. I'm very clear on the path we're on to socialism and destroying wealth and so on. I'm an economics professor at Dixie State University. I get it. However, I think it's more dangerous not to preserve the understanding with our children for the ideals for which we stand, and to recognize when we veered off course.
I think I can help
to work at that.
I think I can help young people understand those ideals without having to have them read an indoctrination chant on a regular basis without really ultimately even knowing what they're saying. I think the Pledge of Allegiance is an incredibly dangerous tool for indoctrination, and that's exactly why Francis Bellamy, the creator of the pledge, put it out there, because he wanted to indoctrinate people. In fact, the message of the pledge is contrary to what should be, you would think, the message of this country. If indeed America is all about rights, the Bill of Rights, which are supposedly supporting the individual and your freedom to pursue life in the way that you want, so long as you don't harm anybody else. That's a very individualistic thing, whereas the Pledge of Allegiance is all talking about not de-individualizing people, that, one nation, all together, indivisible. And I don't have a problem with people coming together for a common cause. That doesn't bother me. But it's not really pushing a message of individual freedom at all. They throw the word liberty in there, but that means different things to different people.
I understand the professor's position.
I'm not going to change your interpretation of it, but for me, no, it doesn't represent anything dangerous. It's no more dangerous to me than it would be to you if you didn't teach your kids ideals. And I think there isn't anything in the pledge that I think, other than the way you've interpreted it, that makes me feel like it's dangerous.
Thanks, Don. I appreciate the call. I do appreciate hearing from you. Just to me, seeing people rise in unison and chant together, that seems creepy, and it seems culty as well. More coming up. This is Free Talk Live.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.